I had grown up Catholic, but I didn't really know what that meant. I kind of went through the motions of it. And so it didn't have much meaning to me yet. And I was still a little bit confused about the ritual, so to speak, I guess, of the Catholic tradition and Mass and prayers and things like that, because I hadn't really visited those things in a while. But they were very calming, and I could see that they meant a lot to a lot of other people, and I was very curious. And so it just kind of inadvertently drew me in more to my faith and started to reintroduce me into the faith that I had grown up in, but not yet understood.
So when I first investigated this Benedictinism thing, I got a copy of the Rule of Benedict and I read through it and I was like, really, God? Are you kidding me? Like, there were things in the rule that at my first reading seemed kind of bizarre. Fortunately, a wonderful sister sent me a commentary on the rule, and then it made sense. And I think one reason it made so much sense is because the Rule of Benedict is actually considered wisdom literature.
So when I'm teaching my undergraduate students, within the first couple of weeks of a semester, we often have to iterate and reiterate that the rule of St. Benedict is actually not a list of rules.
When I talk about the Benedictine values, they're really gospel values. They're really the values espoused by Jesus Christ. They're really a guide for good living.
It's really a rule that helps us to both find our way to God, but also recognizes some of the struggles that we all have and that we all share, some of the temptations that we have. And while not giving into those, not making the process or the lifestyle so arduous that nobody would find it attractive, quite frankly.
That summer, I heard about a camp called Camp Summit, and it's at my favorite nature reserve called Eagle Bluff. I had a very profound experience during adoration when I decided no matter how much it hurt or how sore I was getting, I was going to kneel through adoration the entire time as like a mini sacrifice. I didn't think it was much, but that little sacrifice completely changed my life. I just was praying about all of the bullying that had happened and how it had shaped me. And during that time when I was really, really down and in dumps in the bullying, I had considered ending my life. I had thought that I wasn't even worthy of a smile, wasn't even worthy of being looked at or seen. As I was lifting that up, I just felt this peace and love wash over me. All of those experiences of bullying had made me feel like I was not good enough, and that I would never be good enough, and that I was worthless. And I knew in that instant that was a lie, and that I was worthy, and God loved me so much. I felt His love so, so deep. I'd never felt love like that before. And I just immediately broke down crying. And I was able to forgive all of those bullies because I honestly just felt sad for them that they did not know this love.
We have two original historical sources about St. Benedict. One is his rule itself, and that's always our surest guide to understanding who he was, what his values were, how his wisdom expressed itself in practical ways. We also have a biography of Benedict, written by Pope Gregory the Great, and it takes the form of a classic hagiography, that is, the story of a saint, which has biblical motifs and sort of tells the story in a way that's meant to be edifying for the reader.
He grew up in a fairly well-to-do family in central Italy and then was sent off to Rome to be educated. And it wasn't long in his time in Rome that he realized that it was not a life that was really bringing him closer to God. And so he left.
So this is what sets him on the real path of spiritual development, is having this kind of crisis as a young man, finding that he's kind of a fish out of water and he needs to find something that suits him better. Like so many people do when they have that kind of crisis, he goes into solitude. And so he spends some time living on his own as a hermit near a place called Subiaco, which became his first monastery. That's a place still venerated by Benedictines today.
This is another sort of thing, I think, especially when you're young, you sort of go all the way over here or all the way over here. So we see Benedict perhaps being a little bit extreme in his early years. But he eventually also figured out that even the other extreme wasn't all that helpful. Again, we see Benedict, by the time he comes around to writing his rule, he essentially says the solitary life, being a hermit or being completely on your own, for most people, for the majority of people, isn't actually the best way to become a full human being.
Gradually, he became known in the region. Apparently, there were lots of monks in this area because it was kind of wild and beautiful, and monks tend to like beautiful landscapes. So they come to Benedict and they tell him that they need a spiritual father. It doesn't go well. As sometimes happens in life, a group of people say they want a strong leader, but they don't really want to live under a strong leader. And this is what seems to have happened. And we're told that it got so bad that they decided to assassinate him by putting poison in his cup of wine. So in yet another one of his miracles, as Gregory tells it, he makes the customary blessing over the cup of wine before he drinks it, and it shatters. At this moment, he stood up and said, okay, basically I'm out of here. Go find yourself an abbot after your own ways. And he left. Sometime after that, perhaps tempered by this experience, he gets another chance.
And ultimately what Benedict lands on is, again, this small, intimate community of people who, by virtue of living together and coming to know one another and showing up day after day after day, again, in those ordinary ways, that's how they ultimately form each other.
So as the story continues, you begin to realize that a lot of the overarching themes that he's using are from the stories of the prophet Elijah. So Elijah was served by a raven, so too Benedict had a raven. And you can still see the raven at Subiaco if you go today. Not the same one.
Those who do justice abide in your temple and dwell on your mountain, O God.
Ever since God touched me during that adoration time, I had been considering being a sister. And so I was looking at colleges that had my programs that I wanted, and St. Scholastica came up.
Those who do no wrong to their kindred, those who cast no slur on their neighbors.
And just about cried because I was so happy here, and I couldn't believe I was going to get to live here. Throughout my time here, I've kind of hung out with the sisters a little bit more. I sing for them during daily mass because the religious life really does call to me.
Those who accept no bribes against the innocent shall dwell on your mountain, O God.
I have a surprise to you. We're human beings, and we bring all of our faults and problems with us when we enter, and we probably develop others while we're here. We're very human, but we're capable of moving beyond our faults. We're capable of forgiving each other quickly. Benedict said, never let the sun go down without an apology. If you have hurt someone, you apologize before sunset. That's hard for me. I'm still working on that after 12 years.
One of my favorite metaphors that I've often heard monastics use when talking about a sense of Benedictine community is rocks within a tumbler. that if you want to polish a rock, you don't take it by itself and try and polish it. You have it rubbing up against a bunch of other rocks for a long period of time, and it smooths the edges off, and it polishes it. It becomes beautiful.
We live in community with each other. That doesn't mean there's not going to be tension, but tension is good sometimes, and we should learn to live with that. For me, the bad things in my life that have happened have been honestly the most formative and good things to happen to me in my life, because it showed me who I am, it helped me relate to other people better, and it made me more willing to learn what other people have gone through and how they could be struggling just like I can.
Somebody once asked me, what's the greatest gift of religious life? And I said, community. And they said, what's the greatest challenge? And I said, community.
Open yourself for the sake of spiritual growth. Give yourself as a student of life to those who are living it well, and open yourself to the needs of others. We learn them by living together.
And when Jesus said, be perfect as my Father is perfect, I think what he meant was, be perfect in your love for everyone, as my Father loves everyone.
I think probably the most fundamental gift that the rule gives to a broader audience is, to be honest, the most fundamental gift it gives me, apart from the life and community, of course, is it gives structure. And some of us need that. Even those of us in monasteries need that.
One of I find the most countercultural Benedictine values is that of stability. And I say it's countercultural because I think we're living in a world right now where it's not about sticking with any one thing for the long term. It's about what's the next big thing, or even what's the next little thing. It's moving from, how many friends can I talk to today, or how many experiences can I have?
When I think about the frenetic pace of life for some of us, when I think about the chaos, maybe for some, that's happening around us at various levels, there's a peace. There's a peace that comes when I'm following the rule, when I'm living the rule with integrity.
From a stability sense, it's about not forming new connections, but forming deeper connections with this sense of continuity, with this sense of depth that you don't get by moving from one job to another, that you don't get by moving from one relationship to another. And also a sense of peace in knowing that, especially in a relational way, that relationship is going to endure.
If you remember just one thing about the rule, let it be listen and attend with the ear of the heart.
Listen with the ear of your heart helps us as a community to attend to each other in a way that, again, has much more depth than the kind of listening that we often do in, the culture at large, where we are hearing your words, but the whole time we're hearing your words, we're trying to figure out what our response to your words are going to be, how we can maybe poke holes in that response if we disagree with you. Whereas listening with the ear of your heart is certainly much more holistic, and it's trying to, again, see that whole person in front of you.
It carries with it the invitation to humility, because it means I have to temporarily be willing to put on hold, temporarily, what I think, what I want to say, what I think I might want to say, to try to be so attentive and so present to the person that I'm listening to, that I am willing to allow for the possibility that I might even be changed and transformed by that person in front of me.
The spiritual heart of the rule is chapter 7, and this is where Benedict offers us the 12 steps of humility. Now, that was not his idea originally, the 12 steps of humility. He borrows that from an earlier rule that got it from an earlier writer. But Benedict transforms it, because instead of it being a ladder that eventually takes you to heaven, by cultivating practices of humility. Instead, it becomes a ladder which leads to the fullness of yourself in this life. And finally, when you get to the 12th step of humility, the very last one, where you expect to hear all about this super magnificent, heroic, mystical monk, instead he talks about a monk who's just who he is. And he's the same person in church as he is in the garden, the same person on the road as when he's talking to somebody else. In other words, the truly humble monk is both feet on the ground, look you in the eye, just is. So all of those pretenses and protections that we so often use in life, the masks we wear to protect ourselves or to impress somebody else, they're all gone. And so this is what we are meant to be.
I have what's called a connective tissue disorder, and so that causes my joints to dislocate a lot, and it causes me pain pretty much 24/7. And that's how I kind of got into PT. Was I figured, well, this isn't doing me any good, this is hurting me a lot, but if I can use this to help other people and relate to people and make their experience a little bit better, I should do that.
That's what the degrees of humility are all about. They are growing us from a consciousness of God through honesty of self to the needs of those around us. It's a most powerful spiritual life. It's a most powerful way to be alive.
When the monastic members line up to go into a liturgical event, they will often have a brief pause before processing into the chapel. And that brief pause is meant to signify, it's simply stopping one thing before beginning another. But it's taking that time to recognize that you're leaving certain things behind, but truly leaving them behind so that when you enter into this next experience together, you can really focus on that experience and being present with the people who you are there with. It's about being present together.
We need to find ways of cultivating what so many people today call mindfulness, which is often associated with Buddhism, but it's a classic Christian monastic practice, which is sometimes defined as remembrance of God, just being aware constantly that there is some sustaining force at work in our wondrous cosmos.
So in a lot of institutions, especially medical and educational, we've got the practical pieces of you're paying money to go to school, or you're being paid to teach classes, or you're being paid to show up and do medical care. And if we only look at all of those employees and all of those people who are connected to those institutions through that very limited lens, I think we're unlikely to perpetuate Benedictine values across generations. But I think that to the degree that we look at every person in the way that Benedict says we should do, every guest should be treated as Christ, to listen to every person with the ear of the heart, that's to take a holistic perspective on what the human being is.
The healing message, which I didn't know the Benedictines had here, is very, very strong. They have an assisted living center. They just serve the community in a way that I would like to serve as well. And the Benedictine values, particularly radical hospitality, really appeal to me.
Hospitality is probably the one that Benedictines are most known for. And that sense of hospitality, I think sometimes people get it confused for just being nice and being kind, holding the door open for people and saying hi to people on the sidewalk. And while those things are wonderful, and they do help give our community here a sense of specialness or a sense of being friendly, there's much more to that hospitality. And so when you dig into it and you start to look at the rule and that sense of hospitality coming from the phrase that we are supposed to welcome all as Christ, that starts to be a lot more challenging than holding the door open for people and saying hi to people on the sidewalk. Because welcoming all as Christ, if you dissect that, is welcoming all as Christ. All.
And yes, Christ in the abbot as teacher and as the father of the community, but also unexpectedly, Christ in the sick, Christ in the poor, Christ in the pilgrim. And you realize as you see that coming at you again and again in the rule, that Benedict is saying that Christ is in everyone, and that one of the great spiritual disciplines of life is learning to see him, even in people who are difficult or unattractive or irritating, people with whom we've had conflict or maybe even a major falling out. Christ is in her or him too. But that's not an easy thing always to recognize. And then, as you think about it more, he's saying, by the way, Christ must be in you as well. So if I had to say something to a really broad audience, people who are religious, not religious, Christian, not Christian, consider themselves spiritual or not so much, that the rule of Benedict does not belong just to us. And by that I mean just to Benedictines who have made formal vows in monastic communities. It belongs to the whole of the Christian tradition, and even beyond that, in terms of its representing a kind of wisdom tradition that can be studied and respected by people even outside of Christianity.
So many people are reevaluating their lives and who they are and who they want to be and what they want to do. And that's a wonderful opportunity for us to connect this wonderful treasure that is Benedictinism with what the world needs. We have what the world needs.
The rule needs to be let loose in the world to do what it will. Work for lay people, inspire new monastic communities, whether of the traditional kind or of the so-called new monasticism with lay people forming intentional communities. And that it's got a life and dynamism and a kind of perennial quality about it that will outlast particular places. I love my community. I love this land. I don't know if we're going to be here forever. Odds are we won't, monastic history suggests. But the rule of Benedict will be somewhere, as long as human beings are able to conserve some texts, study spiritual traditions, start over, perhaps after devastating circumstances. And the rule will be there to be that guide for forming sustainable community. And as you look at the world around you today, you can't help but think, this is wisdom that might come in very useful at some point, perhaps in the not too distant future. So that's the hope. We're not perpetuating an institution, we're handing on a spiritual tradition. And where that goes is certainly not in my power or in the power of Benedictine monasteries throughout the world. This is the work of the Spirit, and the Spirit will take it where it needs to go.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us during this film. We really appreciate your attention. There's one more thing, though. As you reflected on the values that were presented, can you pick one, just one, that's resonating with you right now? And consider how you might demonstrate, manifest, live out that particular value in your life every day for 1 year. We invite you to just try it out and see what happens. I think you'll find you will make an important difference in our world. Thank you again, and many blessings.